To hear House Bill 157, Representative O'Donnell. Come forward. Proceed when you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, State Representative Michael O'Donnell, District 95, which is the southernmost part of St. Louis County. We are here, I'm here today to present House Bill 157, and I would have never guessed in all of the legislation, if you showed me all the legislation I was going to file as a state representative and asked me to pick which one would get the most media coverage, this would not have been anywhere near the top of the list. But this thing seems to get pinged. I've been doing this for 3 years now, and it seems to get pinged by the media on a pretty regular basis. And what the bill does essentially allows us or puts us in a group of class of states that should the federal government make daylight savings time permanent, that we would go into that permanent state as well. A lot of folks misunderstand. They get excited and see that I've got a daylight savings time bill, and they think we pass it here and it becomes law, and we start doing our thing. We start being in permanent daylight savings time. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. What we can do is we can go to permanent standard time. So one of the things folks hate is changing the clocks. And there's a lot of studies that show the ill health effects of those changes. Car crashes increase around those times, things like that. But this bill would essentially put us in a group of states who, like I said, once the federal government passes daylight savings time as permanent, we would go to permanent daylight savings time. And that's pretty much it. The challenge is that I had this bill last session, and we heard it in committee, and then we forgot about it because the federal government, the U.S. Senate, included making daylight savings time permanent in a bill that was tantamount to what we would consider a consent bill here in the General Assembly, and it got over to the Senate, and there's a lot of folks that are opposed to daylight savings time being permanent. And they cite how dark it will be in the morning during the wintertime. What I would suggest to you is that most folks are either in work or at school at those points in the day, where I would love to come home and have an extra hour of daylight when I get home from work during the wintertime. And that's really my motivation behind this. The other thing the bill does is it would not go into effect until 2 of the states that border Missouri, 2 of the 8 states that border Missouri would enact it as well. So we have 2, I call them the coasts, the 2 coasts, the St. Louis coast, from all the way from Hannibal all the way down through Cape Girardeau. If Illinois adopts it or doesn't adopt it, you're going to have some challenges across those borders. The St. Louis metropolitan area, you could have some problems there. And same thing on the west side of the state. Kansas City is a metropolitan area that bleeds over into Kansas, and so this doesn't go into effect until at least 2 states would enact it as well. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Just a question. Has any state around us adopted this?
Yes. So the answer to that is Arkansas and Tennessee. And then you've got other states that are considering it as well, including Illinois. Let's see here. Yeah,
so we have one border state that's already adopted it.
Two border states that have adopted, Tennessee and Arkansas, and then you've got Illinois that seems to kind of do the same thing we do. They bring it up and discuss it and move it along, but
okay.
they haven't
So
passed it.
basically, this would go into effect if the federal government.
Correct.
Okay, because it's already been done. Okay, questions? Representative Sauls.
Thank you. To inquire.
Proceed.
Thank you. So I like the idea, and I guess I just want to track what you're saying here. So you prefer it this way as opposed to the opposite way because you'd rather have more light in the evening as opposed to the morning?
Correct.
Okay. What do you say to the, I've read some of these studies, not fully, but get an idea of it that it's safer to actually do it the opposite way, What do you think about that?
I've seen a lot of that, and there is a big movement out there. So when we first filed this bill, there was three of us, one Democrat and two Republicans. And again, I didn't think anybody really cared or paid attention to it. But there's a huge movement out there to make standard time the permanent. And I think it's kind of up to us to decide what we think is best for our communities. I know there was there's pushback because the scary suggestion is that kids will be waiting for the bus in the dark. Well, I don't know about your school district, but my kids waited for the bus in the dark already because they were out there so early. Right. I view this as an opportunity, not a challenge. Those school administrators to delay the start of school by an hour. I mean, there's studies about kids not getting enough sleep, right? And so to be able to do that, to push those kids back by an hour and get them in a little extra sleep, I think is beneficial. So there are definitely pros and cons. Yeah. There's no perfect solution here.
I know I hate losing an hour. I'm sure most people hate losing the hour because it seems like, you're trying to, it just always falls on a day, on a Sunday, and you lose an hour. I don't like that. So, and I agree with the kids part of that. I know that I think part of the challenges are bus routes and making sure everybody gets picked up. I know that our school district has that. My son recently, it was starting at 9:00 and now starts at 7:15. So it's a huge jump for him from just 1 year of school. So I wish that they would do that differently. Of course, this is not a bill on that, but I do appreciate what you're trying to do. I think I personally like it the other way around, but that's just me. So thank you.
And it seems just to that end, I've done some social media posts just to kind of ping people what do they want. Sure. And it seems that that folks overwhelmingly like the daylight savings time model. They like that extra hour. I love when we change the clocks and the change that we just did, and now it's 6:30 and it's still light out. You love that, and then we go to the winter time, and you do that first change, and you're like, it's so dark. It's only 5:15. Yeah. And so that's kind of where my head is. That feeling that I get at that point, just having that extra daylight in the evening, is where a lot of folks heads are.
All right, thank you.
Just a note, at my age, if I lose an hour and never get it back, I'm going to worry about it. Representative Chappelle.
To inquire. So I've, like you, surprised early on when I was door knocking last summer. I had several people bring this up specifically. And the people with whom I spoke in my district, the preference appears to be daylight saving as the standard year-round, then standard time. Nobody wants to change the clocks ever again. Okay. And I think the bulk of the data that has the issues concerning health effects, increased heart attacks, increased strokes, increased traffic accidents, low productivity for the workforce, all those things come about because of the changing back and forth. And of course, I was always told earlier on that this was for farmers. I knew that was a joke because we got up when the sun was out and went to bed when it wasn't. And it didn't make a bit of difference. Made those
comments in the past.
It didn't make a bit of difference what time it was. The only time I knew for sure what time it was when Paul Harvey came on at noon, and that was time to go to the house for dinner. But we didn't care about anything else beyond that. So the reality of it is that I think most people want a standard and not to change back and forth. And the most that I've heard personally, until I got here anyway, was daylight standard because of the hours after work and after school. Simply because it does affect us. We've had this gray, cloudy, rainy garbage for the last couple of days, and I'm wrecked. I'm ready to go take a nap, and I can't do it. But that's how we feel. When you mess with our daylight, it affects us individually. So, I realize the national government does not allow for this option. as of right now. So Tennessee and Arkansas both have. Illinois, you say, is looking at it same way we are. What about Kansas, Nebraska? I mean, is this something that we can get more of a growing movement?
Just even outside of our region, there's states that have passed legislation to make daylight savings time permanent. California's another one that's done the same.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Lovasco.
To inquire. Thank you. First, I want to respond to the last gentleman's comment. I think that while the national government might say we can't do this now, I think we probably could. Nobody else would recognize it, but if the state of Missouri wanted to, within its borders, have whatever time we wanted, I think we can do that under the 10th Amendment. Whether that's wise or not, maybe not. But, I love this bill. My wife, this is her number one bill. She likes it more than any of my bills. I just want to point that out. I haven't co-sponsored it yet, but you'll be seeing that name. Representative Sander has the same bill. I'd already seen his, so I'd done that one. But, it's interesting that the more people talk about this, the more it gets, kind of passion on both sides. And, I've seen polls that almost have it 50-50 in some areas where, just nobody can quite agree on anything other than what we do now is terrible. Yep. That's the one thing that universally nobody wants to do is keep changing clocks back and forth. And we keep doing it. And it's a really good example of government and how, we can get an issue that, unites everyone and yet still not get it done for some reason. Right. And so, whether we go this route or go the other route, I kind of fall into the camp myself that I don't really care what direction we go as long as we're not changing the clocks. But I'm inclined to think that, as long as our local municipalities and whatnot are making us cut our grass in the end of the day, I'd like to have that extra hour that I can actually do it. So I'd probably lean towards daylight myself. But I can tell you my wife, she is very strongly in favor of the daylight side. So I'll be voting in favor of this.
That must be a wife thing because I've had multiple legislators' wives say to me, I love your bill. I love your bill. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Van Schweik.
To inquire and comment.
Proceed.
Thank you, gentlemen, for bringing a bill. This is the third year I've heard this bill in this committee. And matter of fact, this is the bill on which I was quoted the first time in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. You gave me the article.
That's right.
I remember that very well. I guess it's one of the things I did, and I'm not a person who normally sticks their, licks their finger, sticks in it to see which way the wind's blowing. But I did do that on this one. When we switched to daylight savings time, I put a post on Facebook, said, I'll take a poll here for one time. What do you guys want to do on this? And daylight savings time came out just a little bit ahead of regular time. But the thing that was the vast majority was pick one and do it. Do something, stop this madness. I remember a few years ago when this was exec out of rules, one of the representatives commented, and I agree, I was alive at the time. In the 70s, they tried daylight savings time year-round one time for 1 year. Nobody liked it. It was terrible. People were disgusted with it. They wanted to go back to switching the clock back and forth. Now, whether we're different people now than we were then, I don't know. I wouldn't think we're that much different, but maybe we are. I do know, as you said, we can go back to regular time like that, right?
Right now. Yep, Arizona does that.
Yeah. I'd just like to see us get something done with this, one way or the other. Appreciate you bringing your bill. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Strickler.
To inquire and comment.
Proceed.
First of all, I agree. Well, one time, the thing I do worry about the daylight savings time is what the representative just talked about back in the 70s when we did it nationally, and I was just looking up some stuff about it, and it said that it was initially supported by 79% of the public when they did that nationwide, and that after its first winter, support had dropped to 42%. So that does lead me to...
The American electorate is fickle.
Yeah, so that does lead me to worry a little bit about that and to lean maybe toward the standard time. But the question, the thing that I wondered about, right now it's read as any two states, right, surrounding us. And you said, well, we already have two, right? Tennessee and
Correct.
Arkansas.
Yeah, I think my original bill had it at 3, and then we negotiated that first year. Between the 3 bills, we negotiated it down to 2.
Yeah. If it stayed at Arkansas and Tennessee, I think it'd be just crazy in Kansas City. I don't know about the St. Louis.
Crazy in St. Louis. There's going to be some crazy somewhere because
Yeah.
Illinois will pass it before Kansas, and so one of those metro areas is going to get a little wonky for a while. But you hope that once the federal government makes the change, that there's there's a sweep to get
do more.
everybody
I
on,
mean,
get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, would you be open to like to identifying Illinois and Kansas as
I'm reluctant
key
to do
ones?
that because then, if those two states or you
the
require
only
both
ones.
of those, then you've got the other states that border. So the folks along the Iowa border, sure, not as many folks,
Sure.
but they've got the challenge. They're not even going east-west; they're going north-south, and the time is changing.
Right.
So I would prefer to lead on it as opposed to follow. That's my preference.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to note, Indiana stays on, I think, standard time all year long.
Yeah,
The
Arizona and
borders,
Indiana's
the borders have that problem. Sometimes they're, Indiana and Ohio are the same. Sometimes they're not. But people adapt. I mean, they figure that out. So I don't know that that's the main issue here. Representative Lovasco.
This might be a terrible idea. It popped into my head just now, so feel free to shoot it down. But in the spirit of discussion in committee,
conversation.
if we kind of all recognize that people hate the time switch, and we perhaps share a preference for the daylight side, but have to wait for the feds, what if we did both? What if we amended your bill to say we're going to go to permanent standard time now, unless the federal government acts and this pact takes effect, and then we go to permanent daylight time? Is that something you'd be maybe open to, or is that
Yeah, very. I've had that conversation with folks as well, because the overwhelming, just Representative Chappell mentioned, he said, people hate what we're doing. And you said the same thing as well. So yeah, I would be interested in making that. I think that would be kind of interesting. I think we would get to try the permanent, standard
we would know
time.
rather rapidly which one people preferred, I suppose, at that point.
Right, exactly right. So yeah, let's have that conversation. We could even try it. There would be something different. I mean, we got this exec out our first year when the three of us handled the bill. We did nothing with it last year because the feds were doing something. So yeah, let's try something different.
Representative Nixon Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To comment, please.
Please.
Sure. So I sent out a survey to over 40,000 of my constituents and 15 questions. And majority of the questions were kind of answered, but the number one thing was the daylight savings issue. And so we're going through that now, trying to get a census as to what the district wants. And I also have family members that have born and raised in Missouri, moved to Arizona, and they love it. So my only concern is the children, right? Catching a bus in the morning and putting in different precautionary measures for them to safely get to school, and also the depression. So can you speak to that?
So I can't really speak to the depression or the studies. I mean, I kind of shared with the gentleman, my thoughts on that. And I've had the conversation with a lot of folks regarding the children, that I think there's an opportunity there for school administrators to get kids an extra hour of sleep. So I like that prospect. So.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, well, one more. Representative Banger.
Where are we at in the process at the federal level with changing?
I haven't seen any movement on it this year at all.
Okay, I
think
heard
I think a lot of us
ago.
were surprised that like it hit the news and we're like, wait, what? They're going to do something. We're really excited, and then it languished. It sat there and did nothing. It was early, because that's why we stopped. We were kind of waiting to see what the feds did. We're like, okay, let's put this on pause and see what happens, and then we'll respond to it. And it just nothing ever happened with it.
Yeah, I thought I heard something a couple weeks ago. That's why I asked. So, and I was trying to explain to some gals yesterday actually how this all works with the PAC and everything else. They're like, wait a minute, I thought if we just passed it, it passed. But yeah, no, it's definitely a complex situation. And to piggyback on a comment you made about Indiana, my brother lives there, and they started doing the time change back in 2006, which did not make him happy. So they do switch the clocks now in Indiana. They did not for a long time, but they do.
They go back. They went back.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, Anyone here in favor of the bill? Anyone here to testify against the representative's bill? Anybody for information purposes only? If not, this concludes the hearing on House Bill 157.